Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets into northern Israel, most of which were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. The attack is in response to an Israeli strike that killed one of the Iranian-backed militant group's top commanders.
In a concerning report, tensions between the Israeli Defense Forces and Hezbollah in Lebanon burned even hotter as the Middle East teeters on the verge of another all-out war between Israel and Lebanon. Well, at least Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, the Washington Post spoke to civilians, local officials, and soldiers near Israel's northern border with Lebanon to get a more well-rounded view into how the scuffles at that border have really escalated. And they reported that in the aftermath of October 7th, Hezbollah and IDF strikes were exchanged daily. But things have gotten worse because now those strikes are actually happening every hour. So Liron, which is the deputy commander of an IDF army squad, told the Washington Post that each week it's becoming more frequent and more intense. And that's because of the ongoing war in Gaza. The Hezbollah attacks didn't come out of nowhere. They started to basically attack Israel following the invasion into Gaza and the high number of civilians that were getting slaughtered in Gaza. Already too many lives have been lost in this conflict, at least, and right now we're specifically talking about the conflict in the northern border of Israel, right? At least 8 Israeli civilians and 19 IDF soldiers have been killed by Hezbollah strikes. And at least 87 civilians and nearly 300 Hezbollah fighters have been killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon, according to figures compiled by the Washington Post. The UN, United Nations, says more than 94,000 people in the country have fled their homes. So in Lebanon, you have 94,000 people who have had to evacuate their homes as a result of these strikes. And look, same goes for Israelis on the Israeli side of that border, because 60,000 Israelis have been forced to flee their homes. They want to go back home. They want to live in peace. And it's impossible to do that as this war in Gaza continues and as Hezbollah continues to retaliate as a result of that war in Gaza. Now, luckily, for the most part, the Iron Dome has been protecting Israeli civilians. And as I just said, 60,000 of them who live near that border have been forced to flee their homes. Hezbollah did initiate the attacks in the wake of October 7th. The group has stated that it will not stop fighting until Israel and Hamas reach a ceasefire agreement, which is definitely concerning because it doesn't appear that there will be a ceasefire agreement.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
Don't believe anything that you hear in the media. Don't believe anything you hear from Anthony Blinken. Whenever they say, oh, Israel has accepted the ceasefire deal, they're lying to you. They lied the last time they said it, and they're lying this time. And Hamas, they saw the ceasefire proposal by Biden, and there were some concerns with the fact that it wasn't actually a permanent ceasefire, which is what they're demanding. They want a timeline for a permanent ceasefire. So they didn't outright reject it, but they did respond with some changes that they would like to see in the, final outline of that ceasefire. Now, I do also want to remind you that Hezbollah, during the week-long pause in fighting, stopped attacking Israel. So when they say that they'll stop attacking Israel, I actually believe them. They did do that during the week-long pause. But today, in the aftermath of their senior commander being killed, Hezbollah has now vowed to intensify the attacks. So on the other side, it seems that Israelis are actually ready to engage with a full-blown war with Lebanon. Which, you guys want that? Great. How about you fund your own weapons and stop using the American citizens as your personal ATM for your ongoing war in Gaza and your potentially expanded war with other, countries nearby. So a poll on Friday by the Hebrew language daily Mariv found that 62% of Israelis support the idea of a decisive attack on Hezbollah. Now, Herzi Halevi, who is the Israeli Defense Forces top commander, said last week that a decision on whether to launch a full-scale attack was close. The head of the Northern Command said the troops were ready. And look, there is no brake on this car. Understand that. Okay, all gas, no brakes. Because as long as the United States enables whatever the Israeli government wants to do, the Israeli government is going to do whatever it wants to do. And Biden has made it clear that he's not really willing to condition the military aid to Israel in order to use that leverage to rein the Israeli government in. So if I were to bet money on it, I would bet that there will eventually be a full-scale attack, a full-blown war with Lebanon. Now, last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned that Israel was prepared to mount an extremely powerful response to continuing attacks from Hezbollah during a visit to the border area. And Israel has increased the number of reservists it can call up from 50,000 to around 350,000, the Guardian newspaper reported. So just understand what Israel is signaling here. They are far more willing to expand this conflict, this war on Palestinians, to a broader regional war, rather than engage in a ceasefire negotiation in good faith. And the reason why is you have these deranged politicians like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich calling for further escalation of war. So last week, they called on Israel to full out invade Lebanon. Okay. Ben-Gvir stated that Israel will only win after it enters all of Gaza and fights until victory. What exactly does victory mean? Okay. And for victory, we need to go into the north and fight Hezbollah and destroy them. Smotrich called on Netanyahu to give the order and to go to war with Hezbollah. And look, Netanyahu is a little bitch when it comes to these far-right members, the lunatics in that government, because he wants to hold on to power and he's terrified that if he goes against them, they will topple his government. So he is completely at the whims of these crazy people, which is really interesting, right? Because what we keep hearing time and time again from those who want to defend Israel and say that they're not going to engage in genocide, they haven't engaged in genocide, is that the statements that you hear from the likes of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich shouldn't really matter because they're just two individuals within Israel's government. But they're not just two individuals within Israel's government, because clearly they have far more sway over what Netanyahu decides to do. And to be sure, Netanyahu has gone along with what they've wanted to do. So I think that this is foreshadowing. What they are saying is foreshadowing in regard to what the outcome in Lebanon is likely going to be. But if the IDF cannot defeat Hamas, which, how do you defeat Hamas as you're slaughtering civilians and you're building resentment and hostility toward Israel? How do you defeat Hamas when all Israel has managed to do is increase support for Hamas? I mean, Israel has helped Hamas recruit. But I feel like they know that. I think they know that. Well, the Israeli government would probably ask for the support of the United States government, home to politicians like Senator Lindsey Graham, who said the following in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. Let's take a look.
How much more death and destruction do we have to take from the Iranian regime? If you harm one American in Syria by using your Iranian militia against us in Syria, if you escalate the war by urging Hezbollah to attack Israel in the north, if Hamas kills one American and Israeli hostage, we're going to blow up your oil refineries and put you out of business. It is now time to take the war to the Ayatollah's backyard.
So, I mean, this isn't the first time we've heard Lindsey Graham demand that we go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel. But like this is what our politicians are all about. I mean, they're getting paid political contributions by weapons manufacturers, okay, by private military contractors, Raytheon, Boeing, all of those companies. They own politicians like Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham has probably made money trading stocks related to private military contractors. It's just so disgusting how our government really functions and what their genuine priorities are. Now, the Biden administration is allegedly trying to prevent further escalation. I'm not buying it. I don't think our government tries to check Israel or rein Israel in any way, shape, or form. Wagging your finger at Netanyahu is not trying to prevent further escalation. But nonetheless, notable notorious liar, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, stated today that they are achieving a ceasefire in Gaza, or achieving a ceasefire in Gaza is the best way to tone down the conflict between the IDF and Hezbollah. I agree with him on that. It's just that he's lying about Israel's negotiation tactics and whether they're actually negotiating in good faith. And I have a huge problem with that. But nonetheless, he told the Times of Israel, it will take away a justification that Hezbollah has claimed for the attacks it has been engaged in and open a pathway to actually resolve this diplomatically. That's what we're determined to do, meaning implementing a ceasefire. If you're actually trying to engage in ceasefire negotiations in good faith, then the ceasefire should actually be a ceasefire, not a temporary pause in fighting that might build toward a permanent ceasefire. Maybe if we can just believe Israel and go by an honor system. It's scary. It is scary because you know that the US government is going to get involved with a war that Israel wages against Lebanon or in Lebanon. You know the US would get involved if Israel provokes Iran enough to engage in a hot war with Iran. And we would be doing that at a time when Americans need our government to work for us. We have so many issues here. The idea that all of these resources and all of our government's energy is going to be used in fighting more wars in the Middle East, it's just infuriating beyond words, especially when there are other options. In order to really exercise those options, in order to find a pathway to those options, you would need the US to use some leverage and get Israel to negotiate in good faith and to rein in the slaughter of innocent people in Gaza. But the Biden administration has shown that they're unwilling to do that.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.